The narrator of I Know Here adjusts to the unnerving news that her family will leave the only home she's ever known in deeply rural Canada to move to Toronto. At once excited and intimidated, the narrator collects her impressions of the simple and the everyday that have made up her life. In the act of reflection, she comes to appreciate her small and common life to date. I Know Here, though idiosyncratic in concept and execution, delivers a clangorous endorsement of a fact that all readers, young and old, come to eventually, that each one of us lives encased in a single, limited life. And yet, within those limits of experience, we learn to treasure memories of particular beauty. Treasure them and sometimes share them too. The artwork in this book, like memory, is canny. The illustrations suggest naivete with strategy and cunning. Imitating the quixotic renderings of children's artwork, the undaunted strokes of outline and surround also suggest a child's relentless energy and forward motion. The more one looks, the more one sees. Not just the quirkiness and comedy of one's own modest lot in life, but evidence of the bewildering beauty that helps to characterize human experience. I am delighted to present the 2010 Boston Globe Hornbook Award for picture books to I Know Here, published by Groundwood Books, edited by Patsy Aldana, illustrated by Matt James, and written by Laurel Croza. Matt James will speak first.
Thank you. Wow. Really. Hey, everybody. Sorry, I gotta unfold this thing. Can I move this? Okay. This is the first time I've been asked to speak like this, so please bear with me. I'm used to letting my ideas flow through painting and drawing, and I considered letting them flow and winging it here, but it became apparent pretty quickly that it was a flawed strategy. It's amazing to have won this award, and I think it's great that our book has been so well received in the States as well as back home in Canada. And I think this shows that while Laurel's story is set in Canada, the story is a universal one. The story of a kid who loves nature and the world around her. Even though many kids who will read this book live in big cities, they're nonetheless fascinated by with animals and nature and beautiful wild things. And we can all agree that an appreciation of these things is something that deserves nurturing in our kids. After my first look at the story, I was excited about the opportunity to draw a moose and a frog and a wolf and to try to put the puzzle together. Thinking about the story as a whole, I relished the idea of trying to put myself back in the mindset of a youngster with a connection to the out of doors that I've lost in a tangible sense, any tangible sense. The backyard that I ran around in as a kid in Woodstock, Ontario, is now a back alley in downtown Toronto. Memory Lane is kind of one of my favorite and scenic routes. And to create the strong sense of place that Laurel's character had, I looked to my own past. Manitoulin Island is as timeless a place as any I have found in Canada, and it was a campground near Providence Bay on that island that became my visual and spiritual inspiration for this book. While working on the book, I took a trip back to the spot where we had camped when I was a kid. I explored the network of trails that led through the woods, and as a kid, these trails were major thoroughfares. And it was a relief that this beautiful place had changed only in my perception. Those major thoroughfares of my childhood seemed to have shrunk as I had grown, but they remain as beautiful as ever. And it's interesting that this place from my past in Ontario can feel so much like Laurel's description of northern Saskatchewan. I developed a real love of nature as a kid. In high school, I wasn't able to camp as much, but I still managed to sleep out in our Coleman tent trailer on the driveway from time to time. And later on, during one of my summers off from studying illustration, I followed a few friends up to the Yukon and really reconnected with the outdoors. I was so enamored with the summer that I'd had living in a tent that as September approached, I hadn't even registered for my final year at school or found a place to live. Yeah, the school called my folks and they paid my tuition anyway. In the end, the romantic ideal of a life camping I had hoped for didn't materialize. I spent third year camping out on a couch in a moderately oversized student apartment. After I finished school, I found myself hesitant to commit to any kind of real effort to establish myself as a visual artist. I was daunted by the thought of having to focus on my career not only creatively, but from a business perspective. I almost bailed on the idea of being an illustrator altogether. I set that ambition aside and found work in animation. But most of my creative energy was focused on playing music with my friends. We had formed a band during this time and we're out playing as often as possible. In animation, I worked in almost every department possible as long as it didn't involve actually animating anything or designing anything. I worked as a cell painter, a color stylist, a production assistant, and even as an assistant editor, but my greatest successes were as a photocopy guy. The best times were the slow times when the artists got to work on their own stuff, and some really great collaborations occurred quietly, unnoticed by, and in some cases in spite of our employers. I worked in animation over the course of 6 or 7 years, and by the end of that time, I was developing an itch, really feeling the need to express myself visually. I felt hemmed in by the rigid parameters and repetitive nature of the work I'd been doing. Unhappy with the imagery I was seeing and helping to create. I found myself going home and working on projects in which I had a personal investment. I made a lot of band posters that were stapled to telephone poles downtown in Toronto. I screen printed t-shirts and band t-shirts and hand printed at least 1,000 copies of the artwork for one of our records. I was putting love into it, and it was at this point that people really responded to my work, and the more personal it became, the more folks really seemed to be into it. And I've had lots of people who have encouraged me along the way. The first person I want to thank is my mom. Throughout my entire life, she's always encouraged me and the rest of my family to pursue our artistic dreams. As fanciful as our ideas may have been, she's always been a big fan of my art. And we always had the supplies we needed, from lapidary equipment for my brother Carrie to guitars for the two of us, fancy sketchbooks and real paintbrushes. And when my brother and I graduated from making a mess, finger painting on the kitchen floor, she had my grandpa build us an easel. And that was before I was even old enough to go off to school. Making art was really something exciting for us as kids. Right up there with making a pie in the kitchen with Grandma or hanging out in the garage with Gramp. My whole family is creative and I'm inspired by them all. In recent years, it's been great watching my mom, dad, and 88-year-old grandma form a band and make music together. It's been inspiring to watch my brother Carrie develop his childhood aspirations of being a miner into a career as a goldsmith and jewelry designer. Growing up in an environment like that gave me the opportunity to go for it, whatever it was I wanted to do. And I'm often reminded of the special efforts Mom made and continues to make for all of us, so thanks, Mom. I've been lucky enough to have had amazing teachers at all levels of education. I've had great bosses along the way as well. In their own special way, they've encouraged me to quit my day job. They fired me several times. And to all of them, thank you from the bottom of my heart. After my final layoff, it was my friend Tina Cooper who suggested that I could hang some paintings at a little furniture store that she was working at. And the response that I got from that was great. And it was enough to start me down my own road in life, working for myself. And I've been lucky enough to be avoiding day jobs ever since. In fact, everyone who's ever had kind words about my work, everybody who's ever bought one of my paintings, everybody who's shown interest in my book illustration has had a real direct impact on keeping on. I want to thank my agent, Jackie Kaiser, for her help and guidance. I'm obviously indebted to Laurel. I really love the words to this, her first book. And I'm grateful to her for the openness she had towards allowing me to help her tell her story through my pictures. My wife, Rebecca, deserves the biggest thanks, can't look at you, for her generosity of spirit, for her great ideas, for her willingness to put up with my craziness, and for all the hard work she put in, very often on her own when our son Noble was only a very small baby, and I was often very late at work trying to make this book feel right. I wouldn't have been able to create the illustrations that I did had it not been for her understanding, encouragement, and partnership. Everyone at Groundwood, especially Patsy Aldana, Michael Solomon, and Nan Froman, and everyone from the Hornbook, and specifically Roger Sutton and Lolly Robinson. Thanks.